Theresa.
Okay.
Thank you.
So I thought I would start by just showing you what we give the students the very first week of the semester in terms of what the expectations are for the lab notebook. Okay, and I'm happy to share this with whoever would like it. Just some general guidelines, talks about the purpose and general qualities of a good lab book. And I think one of the things we've been trying to do in the micro lab is help give students a basic foundation in lab science and how they need to document what they're doing and record observations, and how the lab notebook is a tool that another scientist might look at to repeat something, but that they might also use going forward. So it's just one page. And what I tell students is that they need to have these elements, but beyond this, it's up to them what they do. So let me show you now an example of one of the student lab notebooks, and all of this is in Notability. So let me just say, for those that maybe aren't as familiar with Notability, I created this document in Word and then imported into Notability as a PDF, and I share my screen with students or use the Apple TV in the classroom. And then here's an example of a student notebook, right? And so one of the big things, you know, just getting students to sort of visualize this notebook, not as something that's just a checklist that they've got to do as a course requirement, but it's a useful tool. So get them used to how you make entries, including the date and so on. So that, and let me show you this student's notebook. Also in terms of navigating. So these are all the pages in the student's notebook. And the nice thing about Notability is the student can go in and, you know, add another page if they want. So if this student's table of contents goes on, you just add another page. Okay, but let me show you some of the entries. And this gets at what Kristen was talking about. So in this particular week in lab, students are working on a bacterial unknown that they're isolating. They did gram stains. This student, and I really love the tools that Notability has to enable students to kind of explore their creative side and how they're sketching things, which is the big thing in micro when we're looking through the microscopes. And labeling things. And then this student also took pictures through the microscope, and that's the actual. So she has both a sketch as well as the image of what she was looking at. And what I've been doing is after the very first week in lab, students had those instructions for how to set up their lab notebook. They did it, and then I had them airdrop their lab notebooks to me at the end of class. I was able to go through and give them formative feedback. And some big things I saw with the students is they didn't necessarily have page numbers, or there was one other thing I was going to show all of you. They didn't necessarily have page numbers, or they omitted dates, so I could give them formative feedback about what they needed to do for that. Another thing I wanted to point out is some students, I've left it up to them, like Kristen said, they minimally are supposed to have an entry every time they're in the lab working. But some students like to import other things, so other handouts that I shared with them. And this is another Word document that I posted on Blackboard. If a student wants to incorporate that into their notebook, it's an easy matter of just adding it to this Notability file. And again, you can move things around, reorganize things over here. So, and really any kind of document can be imported into Notability or image. And it really purposely left it open for students to do what's useful to them, and underscored as long as they've got a good table of contents that documents where things are, that it's useful to them, it's useful to me when I check it. And so I just, this is the most recent check in week 5. So. Anything else you want me to mention?
It's just
It's really great, Teresa. That's cool.
before this, you know, the students would try and take their cell phone and take a picture through the microscope eyepiece, you know, of their gram stain, like the picture Teresa showed. But before we had really nice cell phones, students just had to remember what it looked like. Like in the old days, you just had to remember what you saw. This changes the game. Everyone has the iPad.
Yeah.
Everyone can get a high quality image. I was so impressed last week when one of the students said, well, for one of my enzymatic tests, instead of just taking a picture, I took a video. And they've got that embedded. How amazing.
And it's so easy to give them feedback. You know, in the past, when we were either paper or the very first semester that I had the iPad, I had them share a Google Doc. It just was cumbersome. It's so easy with this to have them share it, and I can mark up on this. I can make comments about, you know, if there's a structure they've omitted, I can make a little note on this, and then I can share it back with them. So, yeah. And it's you know, the very first year, so 2021, students weren't quite as comfortable with it, but now they know more how to use certain features than I do. So that piece, I didn't really find. We did spend some time as a class making sure everybody was comfortable, but it was a quick matter. Within 10 minutes, people were talking to each other. We were talking through what's the best way to organize this. It just is really easy.
I think Jeff's got a question. Raise your hand there.
Yeah, Teresa, is in this notebook, is there an example of a document you created yourself inside of Notability, or are you moving everything from Word in, like that one document?
Well, so what you see right now on the screen, this was created in Notability. This was something the student created
Okay.
right in Notability. And then if I go to the pages here, other things, like here's another example. This was a Word document that the student imported.
Yeah.
And then in this image, this is something the student created, but then she added images
Right.
that she had taken. You know, I import PowerPoint images all the time as well.
Okay.
Do that, and it really lends itself, because the other thing you can do, like if this student wanted to, maybe she wants to move this image. And there's so, I feel like I'm really cumbersome when I do this, but you can copy it, and then I could move that down here.
Mm-hmm.
So, and the students do that all the time. And a lot of times during lab, they'll be taking notes about something, and then they figure something out along the way. And so they reorganize what they wrote. It just makes it so easy.
Yeah, what I'm trying to decide is if I should try and create documents in Notability, or if I should create them in Word or Google and bring them in, or if I just didn't know what is better.
Yeah, I personally prefer to create them in Word or PowerPoint. Those are the two.
Okay, thanks.
Excel to a lesser extent, and then import them and embellish them.
Uh-huh.
Here.
Gotcha.
I have a question.
Yeah, go for it.
So when you finish grading it, where do you airdrop it back to students, or do you send it to, where do you send it to? How do you get it back to them?
I've done it a couple different ways. This semester, what I'm doing so far is, unless there's something really detailed that that I want the student to see my comments on their notebook. I haven't been returning what I marked up here. Instead, I've been communicating with them on Blackboard. So there's a column in the Blackboard grade book, and I just write my feedback. So far it's been kind of short feedback, like, please remember to include dates, or make sure that you're including the time and temperature of incubation, as well as the type of media that you're using. So it hasn't been very complicated. And so I've just been communicating that in the comments on Blackboard. But you could mark this up, and then the next lab period, airdrop it back to the students. So they would have a copy of the graded version with your comments.
Okay, I was just thinking that another way to do it could be to send it to Google Docs, you know, a folder for the
Yeah,
course.
I've done that before. If you want to kind of freeze that version of the notebook, you've got a copy of it at that point in time, and I have uploaded it to the Google Drive. It's some extra steps, and I found it wasn't really necessary for the purpose that we're using.
Okay.
But you can absolutely do that, and then you can give students access to that Google Doc. So, Franz, did you have a question?
Yes, I love it when, yes, because traditionally trained scientists, we don't think about taking pictures right, in the lab.
Yeah.
If you take it, it's a cumbersome process to incorporate the notebook. This is wonderful.
Yeah.
Really a lot to think about. My question to you is, have you done anything, we do a lot of calculations, right, entering data in at least chemical sciences, probably not this class you're teaching, but
Right.
have you done anything that incorporates spreadsheet? Does Notability have a built-in spreadsheet or something?
Well, you might want to use numbers, right?
Yeah, Mike, do you remember what it was too wasn't there something with Notability understanding? Well, I guess you could always handwrite, but certain formulas and symbols.
Yeah, there are some plugins that maybe aren't available to us because of the whole jam thing.
Right.
That does allow Notability to like translate
There's
equations.
like a whole STEM package
Yeah.
that might be worth exploring for what you're talking about, because it is supposed to do a better job at converting handwriting to the accurate equations.
Yeah, there's a math conversion thing.
Right.
Now it's telling me I can manage it.
And that's what we traditionally have been using either Google Sheet or Excel, because it's easier to write text, right? Because the entering numbers, crunching numbers, duplicating formulas and plotting, getting data out of the plots. It's just easier to use those applications, and then we kind of fit the texting part in those apps.
Yeah, and I
I'm
would
wondering
say
if, yeah.
numbers is an interesting combo because like you can take a numbers sheet and you can just remove the table. Like you think of numbers as being a giant workspace, kind of like Notability is. And then, but you can put tables in there and do calculations while also you, for Excel, yeah. But then you can also use the pencil to like make handwritten notes. It's super easy to import
Pulling
photos.
images and video. And
Yeah, it's just a
audio.
different,
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, if calculations were required in your notebook and you wanted to do them right there, I would say that would probably be a better solution than Notability. Yeah, what you lose is the audio, I mean, but that's, you can actually
It's
put
different
audio
audio
clips
and
in.
numbers. It's different the way the audio, if the audio won't sync, in Notability, the audio will sync with what you're writing, right?
Yeah.
So that's a unique feature, but you could still have audio if you wanted to give audio feedback on the calculation, yeah.
And Mike, I remember some of the stuff you did in numbers.
Yeah,
It didn't look like an Excel spreadsheet anymore. Like,
No.
It might have a table in there, but then there's other parts of it that just look more like a document.
yeah, because in numbers, the base of the document is basically just a workspace, and then you add tables in, or like when you make a blank one, it's got a big table on there, but, and then you can actually link tables to each other and things like that. So you can think of it as being, you know, all the worksheets in the bottom of your Excel sheet, they're all just kind of floating around theoretically. Like you also have that functionality too, if you put extra sheets in and stuff, but
Ask the student to try it out, right?
yeah.
Yeah.
and-
They'll probably, know how to.
But the big difference will be too, I mean, you can write on an Excel document on your iPad, but it's not as easy. And you
Is it
can't write in
because our
Google.
version of Or is it
No, that's just,
Excel?
it's Microsoft. I mean, because Microsoft does have a pen tool, but it's a Microsoft product trying to work with the Apple. It's okay, but it's not gonna be quite as natural as as notability or numbers. And Google will do it all. You can't use your Apple Pencil in Google anyway. So like those are the limitations. While they're really good products for the calculation part, you're not gonna get the Apple Pencil integration. So numbers could be.
I had two things. One is, if you're wanting to just the table data kind of work up with it as information to be put in the notebook, you can do it in numbers, take a screenshot and paste the image into the notebook, and at least the data would be there. It would be dynamic, but it would be there. The other thing is you can use the Apple Pencil with the Google Jamboard.
With Jamboards, right?
Which is what I use all the time.
Right, but there's no calculation there. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I'm
No,
trying to get to
yeah,
a
yeah.
spreadsheet thing. Yeah, yep. Yeah, Google Jamboard is the only Google product really you can use the pencil. And it does work great. We use it all the time for different things. Yeah.
You know,
It's a separate app.
It's a separate part of the Google suite, right? Like there's
We
Google
have
Docs.
We have
You have access.
Yeah.
and
Yep,
there
yeah.
is an
We'll give students
Yeah.
a choice. Let them explore that. It's not like you've done it.
I use it every day in my classes,
So
Jamboard.
your students actually have seen it.
using Jamboard with the
Yeah.
Apple Pencil, absolutely.
There are a lot of people.
Yeah, we have lots of those.
So we'll give
I don't know if they're
students
using it for
options.
labs notebooks. Right, I haven't seen that, but yeah. The question I wanted to ask Teresa was the drawings.
Mhm.
I mean, one, when I first looked at those drawings, I thought they were pictures. I didn't realize that was a student. You know,
Yeah,
they're just
no,
that good.
Yeah,
But what I'm wondering is the difference between the quality of the drawings you are seeing here versus what you have
oh
normally
my
seen on
gosh,
paper.
like, they're beautiful. Even students, I think, that didn't have the confidence before, I think it has, it's motivation to be more observant and to capture what they're seeing, and then they sort of have fun doing it.
Yeah,
I am sort of, and this, I chose a very nice notebook, but this is not, I have a lot of students who have sketches like this, and I know Kristen, in your lab section. So it has elevated their ability to make these kind of recordings, which this kind of thing is, something we do in micro lab. So it's really,
and just in those cases, like the ability to zoom in that close, they must have zoomed in very close to draw at that,
Yeah.
micro level, and
Yeah.
then zoom back out, and
Yeah.
it's still really a good part of the notebook to then, like,
yeah.
you just can't do that on paper. Like
Yeah,
that
no,
in itself, it's a small technology, but I'm assuming makes a huge difference in
Right,
what they
right.
can actually.
Well, and
document.
just the facility with which I can check what they're doing
Yeah.
without having to collect notebooks, which they actually need for what they're gonna be doing. So
Yeah.
I can't be hanging on to their notebooks,
Yeah.
So, yeah.
The
it's
students
really-
in lab this week commented on that last point you just made. They were so glad to be able to have it with them all the time because they really want it to look nice, and they care a lot about their work with the notebook.
Yeah.
Whereas traditionally, whatever you get done and hurry up and sketch out during lab would sit there or would turn into your instructor. And so this, there was no, you couldn't get too excited about it because you couldn't take it home and work on it. But the students get a real kick out of it. And you see how they snap the circles? I know, I was just gonna say that. That's a really good example. Later on, when we talk to people about notability, snapping the shapes and why that's like useful, this is a perfect example of doing that.
Yeah,
We're
yeah.
good at this. Yeah, we're good at those little tricks.
They're much better at it than I am.
It's really fun to watch them. Yeah, I agree.
One of the things that.
Excuse me, did they copy and paste these circles, or did they import it from somewhere?
Teresa, can you?
Yeah,
quick circle
so
and-
what you do is you draw a circle and just hold it. And you get the circle shape.
And you can do that with any shape, square, rectangle, I
And
don't know.
then what of the pink things inside it? That's what I'm.
Yeah, so that's a drawing. that the
Oh,
student
yeah,
did
no, so
inside.
that's just a student that did their drawings, and their drawings are gonna be a lot better than my drawings.
Yeah, unselected, yeah. There you go.
Yeah. So,
And
and
they
then
probably
the,
zoomed in, yeah.
Yeah,
so there's the cop's eye there. And they're so good about, using the different aspects of the tool. So I suspect for this, the student you know,
That's really good.
oop, that's too big. I'm not as good at it, but you know, they play around with the different tools. And then the other thing I learned from the students is when you use the highlighter, you know, if you go over it again, it makes it darker. So they have all this beautiful shading and things in their pictures.